Also, I'm going to ask you a general question to start. That's your little daughter we've seen
Yeah.
running up and down the halls. What kind of media environment do you hope that she gets to inherit when she grows up?
Well, the most remarkable thing about being a parent is that it's a whole new education on media. Those of us who are media reformers hear about the issues all the time. Too much advertising to kids, too much commercialism, things like that. But when you become a parent, you're suddenly confronted by it immediately. And you see it in all sorts of ways you never did before. I give you a very good example. We don't think of the store as media. And yet, when you go into a grocery store or all kinds of stores, all the candy is right at kid level. That is a commercial media decision. We're putting a product in front of them in a setting that grabs them. And I'll tell you one thing, it makes parenting harder. And we see that in media all the time, that decisions are made by very large corporations with the purpose of making a lot of money. And they know that the best way to do so is to get kids at very, very young ages. And so we see it in television, we see it in even children's books. I even see it in bandages. All of the big movies now make bandages with commercial promotions for the movies, and all the kids have to have a certain kind of bandage for a certain cartoon or something. So the world I want my daughter to grow up in is a very different world than that. I want her to grow up in a world where she gets to make choices when she's ready to make those choices about what media she wants, what products she wants, what kind of person she wants to be. I don't want it forced on her by someone I don't know whose primary motivation is to make a lot of money. And I think that we know that we have the ability to intervene on these issues, but a lot of us, I think maybe before we become parents, we don't realize the necessity of those interventions. We talk so much about politics and big issues, wars and economics and things like that. And we may sometimes lose sight of the fact that the first place to act on media is at the child's level. The commercial folks put the candy at the eye level of the kid. We ought to put a lot of our activism at the level of those who are going after children. And countries around the world have already acted on this. Many Scandinavian countries bar television advertising during the hours when the majority of the audience is children. The European Union is now exploring this as a universal concept. We have good models already for how to address these issues. We've got to bring these to America. And we've got to create a situation where all parents have a media environment, a media landscape, where they have a lot of authority over the amount of media their child is introduced to, and also that they have at least some assurance that when their child is introduced to media, television, videos, and things like that, that there aren't behind-the-scenes schemes afoot that those parents don't know about to insert products, to make commercial overlays, and ultimately to warp the entertainment experience into a sales experience. We can do that. We have policies to address those things, but my child will only grow up in that world if we as media reformers get very, very serious about focusing in on what the corporate sector knows a lot about already, which is that those years from 0 to 4, that's when you make customers and you reach people. We've got to, as a movement, step between the corporate community and families, their kids, and say, hold it. It shouldn't be that way. Until you're 4, you ought to be able to be at least a little bit free from the commercial carpet bombing that the rest of us experience.
Well said. Let's talk a little bit about internet freedom. We talked a lot with folks about neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're coming off some big wins there. Work still to be done. But let's talk about another dimension of the whole campaign, which is accessibility.
Yeah.
A lot of people, for a lot of people, these debates are kind of academic because they don't have access. They either don't have any access at all, or they don't have access to broadband. Mm-hmm. What do we need to do in 2007 to bridge that growing digital divide?
Well, one of the things I tell people is that there is no digital divide. There's a divide. We have a country of rich and poor. We have a country of urban and rural. We have a country where you are born, physically, where you are born, has huge impacts on what kind of media you have access to, how much education you can get a piece of. And so when we begin to address the divide, that's how we make all the rest of the things sort out. Now, we in the media reform movement believe that the reason you go at the digital divide, the reason you go into that area, is to address the broader challenge, the broader divide. You want to get information to people so that they can be full participants in society. The internet is not nirvana. It's not the delivering vehicle that will take us to a better world. It is simply the tool by which a lot of information is flying around at this point. 100 years ago, that was the newspaper. 50 years ago, it was radio. 25 years ago, it was TV. You always have some new medium or some contemporary medium that people think is just the cat's pajamas, the absolutely essential thing. We got to be all about it. We got to make sure everybody has a piece of it. Well, just getting everybody a piece of it isn't going to be the solution. But getting everybody access to as much information as is possible to get to them, and making sure that there's no barriers to that, that's essential. So what do we do about this divide, especially as regards digital? It's not that hard. It's not that hard. Countries around the world have made the choice that they're going to wire everything, that everything's going to be online. And it's done by the government as a public policy choice. It's not divvied up to different corporations and to different communities and say, well, maybe because we have some visionary people here, this is going to be a great place. It'll be the hottest spot in America, but 2 miles down the road isn't. That's dysfunctional. And we know with that broader divide how it always ends up. Those who already have plenty of information and plenty of access to communications will get the best digital. Well, that is a civil rights issue. That is an economic justice issue. That's a fundamental America issue. And what it is if we say that communications, that information, be it digital, be it print, be it broadcast, is going to mostly go to the rich, it's going to mostly go to the powerful, then we are going to continue to widen the gap between those who have and those who have not. What we know is that it is very possible to narrow that gap. It is very possible to create an internet system in a country, if you will, create a digital system in a country where everybody has access, and then once everybody has access, to then take that next step, which is really the most vital one, that everybody has knowledge of how to use the information. One of the things that's interesting in our society today is that we have tens of millions of Americans who have computers but don't know how to use the internet, or that don't know really how to fully utilize it. And this is where I think we go back to the education component. We need media literacy programs in our schools. Everybody talks about making sure every school is wired and that every kid has a computer. I'm for that. But I'm also for making sure that every kid knows how to use that computer and that every kid knows why they're using that computer. It's not to buy stuff. It's not merely to be entertained. You have that computer because there's a very good chance that computer ultimately is going to replace the newspaper, maybe even replace books or some variation on it. And so you have that to get the information you need to be a citizen. And basically, you have that to figure out whether you're going to set the course of this society and this country, or whether you're going to be somebody that it all happens to. Now, that's citizenship training. It's not technology training. But if I want to bridge the digital divide, I want to get access, and we do that by law and by public policy. I want to get the equipment to people. We do that by law, by public policy, by taxation, frankly, and spending our money well, but also by looking to enlightened technology corporations who want to get this technology to people. And then finally, we do that by education. We have to teach people that the reason they have a computer and the reason they have this internet access is, in addition to having fun with it, and we hope they have a great time, it is that this is very likely to be the vehicle by which we experience our democracy and by which we act as citizens, and that they need to know especially how to use it in that way.
Let's talk about a bit about the Stop Big Media campaign. One of the elements of that campaign is going to be a strategy for Kevin Martin. We've got some heroes on the FCC. We've got some bad guys. Mm-hmm. He's a bad guy. What do people who care about media reform need to do about Kevin Martin in the year ahead?
The main thing that we need to do as regards the FCC is to shore up those members of the FCC who already get it. We have 2 members of the FCC now who get it, Jonathan Adelstein and Michael Copps. They've been champions. They come to our conferences. They go out on their own to hold hearings around the country. I mean, they're great. We have 3 members who, to varying extents, don't get it. And I will tell you that's the bottom line reality. And I know it's hard to believe because the media beats this consciousness out of us. But if enough people scream loud enough, sometimes they break the sound barrier. You actually get through to those in power. And we're going to have a time when we have to scream coming very soon. Because big media is best understood as a vampire. You know, if you watch the old vampire movies, you can use the garlic, but that doesn't get rid of them. And then maybe you'll use, get some sunlight, and even that doesn't get rid of them. They keep coming back, pushing the coffin top open and coming back at you. Big media will always come back, demanding rule changes that allow it to become bigger and wealthier. That's just the bottom line. It's guaranteed. So we fight these fights again and again. But as we educate citizens about the need to fight those fights, and as they get more and more sophisticated with regard to it, it gets harder for FCC commissioners to buy into the big media line, to fall into line, to do what they're told to do. And the big media campaign right now, Stop Big Media, is all about teaching citizens what they need to know about the threats that are coming at them. Understand this. If you went out and surveyed the first 10 million Americans you met, and you said, do you want to live in a company town, a one newsroom town, where a handful of people decide, mainly for commercial reasons, what information you get through the newspaper, the alternative weekly, the television stations, the radio stations, the internet sites, what's on the billboards, and what concerts are programmed in the concert halls. You want one company to own all that and run it out of one shop. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea? I will guarantee you, ask those 10 million, you're not going to find one of them that says, oh yeah, I love that idea. That'd be great. I really want to be, the lab rat for these guys. I want to jump when they prod me. I want to, when they poke me, I want to do what they tell me to do. No one wants that. And yet that is exactly what is proposed. It is to make one newsroom towns essentially controlled by one media company with a hold on print, broadcast, and digital communications, as well as physical communications in the form of billboards and concert halls and things like that. That's what we're up against. The more we talk to people about it, the more we get that concept into people's heads, the more powerful we are with regards to Kevin Martin and to anybody else who comes on the FCC in the future. See, the thing is, we're not going to win this fight by convincing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 FCC members to be on our side. Because FCC members are evolutionary. They come and go. And so big media is a permanent reality. It's always there, always demanding more access, more power, more wealth. If we build a citizen movement on the other side saying, no, we want information. We want culture that respects us. We want a media that sustains and supports democracy. If that's there, the more powerful that community gets, the harder it is going to be for big media to pressure the FCC. And at the end of the day, it won't matter who the FCC commissioners are. We'll win. But until we get that consciousness broadly afoot in America, we run the risk of something coming in through the back door. It's getting harder because of this movement. That back door is getting closed up and locked a little better, so we all got to do all of our business in the front room now. But there's always a lobbyist for big media back behind the building trying to pick the lock and get in that back door. We got to bolt it. We got to make this policy making transparent, out front, something everybody can see and everybody knows about, and then we have to have people educated about what's at stake. When that happens, I don't care who's appointing the FCC, and I don't care who's on it, we will win.
Well, last question for you is about the public media campaign, and I don't know if you agree with this or not. I just speaking personally, I feel like one of the challenges for trying to get people fired up about the future of public media is that for younger people, aside from experiences, the very positive experiences they have with public broadcasting, with like Sesame Street,
sure,
for example, they don't have a lot of really kind of fresh contemporary examples that they can point at and go, yeah, we need more of that. And so, how do you think, the kinds of stuff we were talking about earlier with like these new possibilities for digital broadcasting,
sure,
are opening up a whole new sort of possibility for what public media can be, and how does that sort of connect back to the fight for better sort of public media policy?
Public media in this country has been in a boxing match with commercial media. Unfortunately, public media has had both of its arms tied behind its back. Public broadcasting outlets aren't even allowed to cover certain things because that would be infringing on the turf that's been given over to the commercial sector. It's an absurd circumstance. We have taught generations of America that public television is good for them, but not necessarily entertaining or particularly useful. Now I know that around this, what?
It's like
it is. We have made public television the broccoli or the asparagus of the media diet. And so there's a lot of people who say, they will tell you in surveys, they'll say, oh, I love public TV. I'm all for it. Do you watch it? Well, when I get a chance. And so the first thing we need to do is allow public broadcasting on the radio and on the television side to take the gloves off and really get into that fight with commercial media. We need to make it a fair fight. And I think that if it's done, an institution that operates with civic and democratic values rather than purely with commercial and entertainment values will do very, very well. But we do have to get it back in the game. How do you do that? Well, digital is the best way to do it. We know from examples around the country, there are some states that have multiple public radio networks. So they have a classical network, they have a public information network, news mainly, and then they have a talk network. And the people in those states love their public radio. They give very generously to it. They support it in all sorts of ways because they're getting a lot of different choices, and it's real. Other states we have around this country where the public radio network is one tiny, usually close to bankrupt operation that is struggling to stay on the air and struggling to satisfy everybody. A little bit of classical here, a little bit of all things considered there, maybe a talk show, but it doesn't work. Digital allows us to open that up. It allows us to have a lot of different vehicles by which public broadcasting and public programming can occur. And as we give the public sector those opportunities, it can compete. And I think it's going to do very, very well because one of the realities of commercial media right now is that it is abandoning the local and the regional. Commercial media, particularly in broadcast, is programmed usually out of LA or San Antonio or someplace like that. It's very formatted. Everybody has a consultant that tells them on TV or news broadcast has to have 7 minutes of weather and 8 minutes of sports and then, the rest of it crime. And so the bottom line is that the commercial sector is becoming less and less useful for people in the places where they live. That creates a huge opening for a supercharged public media, be it radio, be it television, be it digital. But to make that work, we've got to get more vehicles, more formats, if you will, more ways in which to do public media. We also have to get serious about the funding of it. This is an absurd circumstance in this country. We give pennies for all of our public broadcasting compared to other countries around the world that gives hundreds of dollars. Now, I'm not saying that we go to the American people and say, oh, you've got to really open up your checkbook and pay a lot of extra taxes. That's not the point. I think we get plenty of money into the federal government right now. But the fact of the matter is that in a democracy, one of the first things that the public treasury, that the Commonwealth ought to be used for is to make sure that the people are informed, that they have access to a lot of information and to a lot of culture. Those are useful things. Well, the best way for government to do that is to get some resources out to public broadcasting and allow them not just to open up new digital channels, but to put really good programming there. And while you're doing it, let's spread some money around to community broadcasting as well, to some of these indie media folks who are operating in a nonprofit setting, very much parallel to the public sector, but maybe they can do it better because they're even more grassroots. There's no reason that the public treasury ought only to be limited to a few highbrow programs. We can spread that money around, and one of the best ways to do it as a movement is to organize the people who are consumers of public radio, public television, community radio, indie media outlets as a lobby, and to get them in there demanding their piece of the pie. Trust me, there's no way that small d democratic lobby of real citizens from across this country will ever take as much from the public treasury as big media does right now. Big media takes the people's airwaves free of charge and makes billions from them. If we were any other country in the world and we were leasing those airwaves to the big media companies, we'd be a much wealthier nation. We wouldn't just be able to create better media. If we were leasing the airwaves at a fair rate to big media, well, hell, we'd probably solve our healthcare crisis, education crisis, and a couple other things. So that's the reality. Big media is getting the biggest giveaway you can possibly imagine. I think it's only reasonable that a media that we have some democratic control over and that potentially could be illuminating and sustaining to a democracy get its fair share.